Thank you for joining us, everyone. This is another program sponsored by the Matawan Aberdeen Public Library, and tonight we have Baseball in America, and our speaker is Evan Weiner, and Evan is a sports commentator, a journalist, and an author. So he's going to present a lively, revealing look at the history of baseball and its influences on our culture. So I think it's going to be a really great program. So I hope you enjoy it. I'm going to go ahead and mute myself, but if you need anything, Evan, I'm right here.
Okay.
Right, so
thank you, Jill. Thank you for inviting me. Thank the library for also inviting me. My name is Evan Weiner, and on that slide, I think you know that guy, don't you? Yogi. And not too far from you is the Yogi Berra Learning Center and Museum, and I spent about 6-7 years doing talks at the Learning Center, and Yogi would come to every one of my talks, and virtually everyone. He missed one or two, and he would always say the same thing to me, just pat me on the back. He said, "Good job, kid. Good job, kid. Want some tuna fish sandwich?" And I said, sure, why not? So anyway, Yogi Berra is a major part of baseball in the American culture. And why? Because he was around in the 1950s at the World Series virtually every year, except 1954 and 1959. And the Yankees were in the World Series most of his career, which ended in 1963. And he was the manager of the Yankees in 1964. And if you look at it, in the 50s, they missed going to the World Series twice. And in the 60s, until they fired him, the Yankees were in 5 World Series. So Yogi was very, very well known, not only as a baseball player, but as a pitchman, and because of Joe Garagiola, because of Yogiisms. And Yogi, a major part of the American culture. In 1954, there was a French philosopher by the name of Jacques Barzun. And he noted, whoever wants to know the heart and mind of America had better learn baseball. And if you're going to learn baseball, you should do it. Not at a major league game. Of course, there were only 16 teams at that point in about 11 American cities, but you should go see a minor league game. Or better yet, go see a Sandlot game, or go see a high school game or an industrial league game, because that's where you learn a lot about America. America. Oh, baseball's in the culture for a very, very long time. 1865, Andrew Johnson tried to unite the North and the South after the Civil War by inviting members of the Brooklyn Athletics and the Washington Nationals to the White House in an effort to mend the Union after the Civil War. Casey at the bat, a major part of the culture. No joy in Mudville today because the mighty Casey struck out. They had a 1946 cartoon slide from the Walt Disney cartoon, Casey at the Bat, which was voiced by Jerry Colonna. Now, Casey at the Bat has an interesting history, and it is one of the first things that propels baseball into the American culture. Baseball did not have to necessarily sell the game of baseball. It crept into the American culture, and it really starts with this poem written by an anonymous guy in 1888. Well, we found out later on the anonymous guy was Ernest Thayer. Ernest Thayer and I have one thing in common. He was a columnist with the San Francisco Examiner in the 19th century between 1886 and 1888. And I wrote for the San Francisco Examiner some op-ed pieces in 2001. Now, Thayer just threw this thing away. Sometimes as a writer, you just need to fill space, and well, why not fill space? And he was filling space with a baseball story here about somebody named Casey, but we don't know who Casey was, and Thayer never really told us who Casey was. Hey, he might have been Mike King Kong Kelly, who was hitting home runs back in New England, or it might have been somebody who played baseball in Stockton, the Mudville Nine. The mighty Casey is struck out. There's no joy in Mudville because the mighty Casey is struck out. It would be 7 years later that Thayer would claim ownership of this poem, which was incredibly successful in the United States by this point. He read the poem at a Harvard class reunion, and he got a lot of assistance in getting this poem out there. One from an actor, another from somebody who actually recorded it on a cylinder in 1893. The actor DeWolf Hopper. And his daughter, you might know, was Heather Hopper. She was an actress, and then she was a gossip columnist, I believe for Hearst. And there is DeWolf Hopper. Now, somehow DeWolf Hopper got a hold of this poem. Newspapers back in 1888 did not have internet availability globally. You had to have the newspaper or had to have somebody give you the newspaper in the vicinity of San Francisco. Somehow Hopper got a piece of, or got the paper and decided, hey, this is a pretty good thing. I'm going to commit it to the stage. And he did. It became a vaudeville act. It was first performed by DeWolf Hopper on August 14th, 1888, which was about 9 weeks after Casey appeared in the San Francisco Examiner. Estimated that Hopper performed the poem more than 10,000 times. Maybe because of Hopper, maybe because of other things, the poem actually ended up into public education. Me, for example, PS 151, Woodside, Queens. It's 1965. I'm 9 years old, and Miss Alexander. And Miss Alexander was one of those old spinster New York teachers that was married to her profession. She probably was in her 60s at the time, but we were convinced she was about 130 years old. And she wore the white blouse, and she had the napkin stuffed here, and she had the blue skirt, and she had the blue hair and all that other stuff. And she gives us an assignment. And the assignment is pretty simple. Read Casey at the Bat and analyze it. Well, for me, it was pretty simple. The guy struck out with a chance to win the game. He must have been a lousy player, right? No. He wasn't a lousy player. It's all about man. It's all about man and failure. That the best laid plans of men don't always go that way. You could strike out with the bases loaded in the bottom of the ninth with the game on the line. To me, it's a lousy player. Still is all these years later. It's like Ron Swoboda striking out 5 times in a game in 1969, a game I attended, St. Louis Cardinals against the New York Mets, doubleheader, June of 1969. But anyway, it's a vaudeville act, and he performs it 10,000 times at least. And he also performs it on record and also in silent movies. Now, this is the Springfield Library, if I could mention the competitor, although I doubt that they're a competitor. And there's a room in the Springfield Library in New Jersey, and it's made up of stuff that a hermit in town passed away, and they went to his apartment and they found all kinds of interesting things, including that thing that I'm pointing to in the picture. And it is a big cylinder that you put into there, and it spins around and it makes all kinds of noise. This particular thing played Sousa. It still works. But in 1893, if you wanted to listen to Casey at the Bat, you wanted an actor to do it, you could in your house. There is Russell Hunting. Russell Hunting was a sound recordist, and he was an actor, and he played around with sounds in the 1890s. And he was an entertainer, and he records it in 1893 and again in 1898, both times using a heavy Irish brogue. In 1905, John Kaiser goes down to Menlo Park, not too far from you in New Jersey, and records it for Thomas Edison. Hopper would finally get around to recording Casey at the Bat 18 years after he started performing it. He did it for Victor, which became RCA Victor, and you might remember Nipper listening to his master's voice. Well, that doesn't come out till 1906. So at this point, if you're at home, you have 4 chances actually, to listen to this at home. And maybe listening to it on that. That's Segway Quebec. I speak on cruise ships, or I used to speak on cruise ships. Maybe I will when they come back eventually after COVID. And there was a guy who had a garage in the Quebec City. And you walked into the garage and you saw all kinds of things. And I spotted this Victrola, cranked up Victrola, and I said, this is perfect, because that's how you would listen to whether it was Kaiser or whether it was Hopper. You'd listen to it on one of those, and you'd crank it up and you'd play it, and there's Take Me Out to, not Take Me Out, you could have listened to Take Me Out to the Ball Game by this point with that Victrola, but that is where you could hear Casey at the bat. Hopper would be the first to commit the verse to film. That would happen in 1922, a short subject by Lee DeForest. Wallace Beery starred in a 1927 version of the film. The comic Jerry Colonna recorded a rendition for the Disney cartoon in 1946, Casey at the Bat. Jackie Gleason performed it on his television show in the 1950s. Major League Baseball players, Johnny Bench, Tug McGraw voiced the poem in orchestral settings, and George Steinbrenner and Billy Martin did it together in the 1980s in Tampa. I'm not sure which job Billy was in between, whether it was 1 or 2 or 2 or 3 or 3 or 4 or 4 or 5, but they did it together, George and Billy, to raise money for the Tampa PBA in the 1980s. Any of you looking at that sign, any of you know what that sign means? And you could put that into the text box if you have any idea what ball game today at the Polo Grounds is. Well, if you don't, I will tell you. Ball game today at the Polo Grounds. There was a songwriter. His name was Jack Norworth, and he's riding the subway somewhere in Manhattan, and he's looking up at all the signs. I don't think Dr. Zinsmore was around in those days for his acne cure. Remember, subways were all filled with Zinsmore signs. But there was this sign, ball game today at the Polo Grounds, which meant the New York Giants, and depending on what train you were on, you could get up to 8th Avenue and 155th Street to see a New York Giants game. Now, Norworth had never gone to a baseball game before. In fact, he didn't know very much about it. But he looked at that sign and looked at that sign and looked at that sign and began to think, there may be something there. So he talks to his lyricist, a guy by the name of Albert von Tilzer. And he never saw a baseball game either. So neither one of them seen the baseball game, and they're thinking about doing a baseball song. And the song is written in 1908. And it was repopularized in the 1980s by this guy, Harry Carey, the voice of the Chicago Cubs on TV, who in between the top of the 7th and the bottom of the 7th inning, with his 6 best friends next to him, all named Bud, last name Weiser, yeah, he had the sponsor's product while he was working, would sing Take Me Out to the Ball Game at every home game at Wrigley Field in Chicago, or Cubs Park, as they used to call it, for the Chicago Cubs. And he would sing it badly, and that was the beauty of it. He would sing it poorly, and then after Harry died, or during Harry's life, and then after he died, they bring other singers in, well, alleged singers in, to sing it, and the catch was, you had to sing it as badly as Harry. Take me out to the ball game, take me out to the crowd, buy me some peanuts and Cracker Jacks. I don't care if I ever get back, for we will root for the home team. They don't win. It's a shame. For it's 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out at the old ball game. You know that stanza. That's the second stanza of the song. Oh, this is a complicated song. It's a very complicated song. Now, Von Tilzer came up with this idea. I'm going to have this young woman, Katie Casey, as the center of this song. And the song opens up with Katie Casey has the fever. She has the baseball bug, and it's bad. And then she's going out on a date, whether it's a boyfriend, a husband, a brother, just a friend, we don't know. But we do know this, that they seemingly are on the subway going back and forth, trying to figure out what to do. Now, baseball games used to start at 3 o'clock in the afternoon in those days. And they're going back and forth. Katie suggests, take me out to the ball game. Take me out to the crowd. Boyfriend, no, don't want to go. I want to go to the ball game. Let's do something else. No, I want to go to the ball game. I want to go to the ball game. She can't take it anymore. She breaks out. Take me out to the ball game. Take me out to the crowd. Buy me some peanuts and Cracker Jacks. I don't care if I ever get back, for we will root for the home team. If they don't win, it's a shame. For it's 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out at the old ball game. We don't know if Katie and the guy ever made it to the baseball game. We do know a couple things about Katie. Katie is a rabid baseball fan, which was highly unusual in 1908. Women did not go to baseball games in 1908 when the song was written. It was looked down upon, baseball. A bunch of thugs and ruffians playing the game. You know, a guy gets thrown off a train in Niagara Falls and plunges to his death, Delaney, back around the turn of the century. All kind of ruffians in the game. So, you know, why would a woman go? It's not ladylike. The suggestion last year, 2019, in the Washington Post, was that it was one of the first women's liberation songs. Whether Von Tilzer and Norwith planned it or not, it is a woman standing up for herself, going to a place that women were not necessarily accepted, the baseball game. So we don't know what exactly happened to Katie Casey, but we do know a couple of things. One is she loves baseball. 2, she knows all the guys by heart. They have no numbers on their back, nor do they have their names on their back. And she knows how to get them going. Well, we don't know if she knows how to get them going in the sense of Bull Durham and the Susan Sarandon character, Annie in Bull Durham, or she just roots them on. But we know she has the baseball bug bad. So the song's written in 1908. These guys never saw a baseball game. Norwith would see a baseball game in 1928. Von Tilzer would get to a baseball game 32 years later in 1940. And the song would become famous on the vaudeville stage. Now, baseball has some things going for it that they didn't necessarily have to just promote the game from within. They have Casey at the bat. They have the song. It's outside forces that are making baseball more popular in the culture. Poetry, literature, and song at this point. Song becomes famous because of Nora Bayes. She was Norwith's wife, and she popularized it on the vaudeville stage. And she also sung it with another song, Shine On Harvest Moon. You can make the argument that in 2020, COVID or not, that 1908's Take Me Out to the Ball Game is still the most popular song written in 1908. Under normal circumstances, it played virtually every day from the end of February to the end of the World Series at Major League Baseball games, played at minor league baseball games. It could be played at Little League. It's played all over the place. 1908, Take Me Out to the Ball Game. By the way, also in the culture, at roughly this time, and I talked about this being a suffragette song or women's lib song. In 1910, the suffragettes were in Washington, April 14th, 1910, and they were in the Oval Office explaining to William Howard Taft, the president, how important it was for women to get the vote. Taft didn't want to hear anything of it, and basically wanted to lift his spirits. So he sent a note to an aide, get me out of here, take me out to the ball game, literally take me out to the ball game. The Washington Nationals home opener, which was April 14th, 1910, he got out because the women were pounding on him for the vote, and he created 2 baseball traditions. One, the presidential opener, throwing out the first ball. It was opening day in Washington. And the other, the 7th inning stretch. Taft was a very big man, over 300 pounds, sitting in 19-inch seats. He gets up in between the top of the 7th and bottom of the 7th inning, kind of stretches out a little bit. The whole crowd stands up out of respect for the president, and they're looking at him, and then he sits down, and they sit down. The beginning of the 7th inning stretch. So that's all because of the women's liberation movement, which wasn't called the women's liberation movement, but it did have an impact on baseball in the culture. The song would be played for the first time at the baseball game in 1934 during the Detroit Tigers St. Louis Cardinals World Series in Detroit in 1936. It was used as a centerpiece of the opera, Night at the Opera. Groucho there, throwing peanuts and Cracker Jacks all over the place. There is Groucho. And the movie is Night at the Opera. Quickly, Groucho and Margaret Dumont go over to Italy. They're looking for the world's greatest tenor because Margaret Dumont wants that for her opera. And they meet Harpo and Chico, and they have another tenor who they think is the greatest tenor too. That they're in the stowaway scene and in the steam room scene where everybody's getting food. And eventually the aria is played. And they got to kill some time to get Harpo and Chico's tenor there and get rid of Margaret Dumont's tenor. So they do, and part of the time killing part is that everybody in the orchestra pit gets "Take Me Out to the Ball Game." Harpo and Chico start playing ball, and Groucho starts selling peanuts and Cracker Jacks. Harpo would return to the song "I Love Lucy" in 1955. The song would be in numerous movies and television shows. Baseball and the culture, and it's the culture that's driving baseball. That is Abbott and Costello. Who's on first? What's on second? And Abbott and Costello. This is a routine that in vaudeville and in both burlesques, B-U-R-L-E-S-K-U-E burlesque or B-U-R-L-E-S-K burlesque, either one of them. The burlesque with a K, the women took their clothes off. The burlesque with a Q-U-E at the end was a family show, more family-oriented show. And there were comics like this that would be doing a routine that was called Rounders. And Rounders was pretty simple. You had the smart aleck guy, in this case Bud Abbott, and you had the stooge, in this case Lou Costello, asking all these questions of the guy, the straight man, Bud Abbott, who, by the way, got 60% of the receipts, while Costello only got 40% of the receipts. And Costello would be asking dumb questions. It was just a regular routine in vaudeville or burlesque, Rounders. But baseball, oddly enough, came out of a game called Rounders. If you go up to North Adams, Massachusetts, there's a little baseball museum there. And the baseball museum there is for Jack Chesborough. And Jack Chesborough won 41 games for the New York Highlanders, the New York Yankees' predecessor, in 1904. In the museum, there is a little section, and you see a newspaper clipping from about 1790, 1792. And in that clipping, it says baseball started, or baseball was played in Pittsfield in around 1792. So at this point, it's Rounders, or it came out of Rounders. And so it came out of Rounders. And so they're doing a routine. And their routine is Rounders. Now, how did baseball start? Well, allegedly in 1839, Abner Doubleday invented baseball. At least Abner Graves claims he did. He did because Abner Graves remembered as a 5-year-old seeing Abner Doubleday in Cooperstown in 1839, but that's not the real story. The Mills Commission wanted to find out, how did baseball start in the United States? Nobody knows how it started. They know it was played in the 1790s in Massachusetts. But they found this guy who was a drunk who claimed he was in Cooperstown as a 5-year-old watching Abner Doubleday. Doubleday was at West Point at that point. He was at West Point. He didn't go to Cooperstown. He didn't invent baseball, but it's a cool start. But baseball came out of Rounders, and their routine was called Rounders. It was a vaudeville act that was very common back in those days. Now, questions are, did Abbott and Costello pay Michael Musto $15 for the routine, or did they steal it? Well, that's kind of murky. In fact, other people have claimed that they came up with the routine before Michael Musto, but Musto is the guy who people think did the routine. Now, I have a friend, a comic friend by the name of John Joseph. John says, of course they paid the $15 for the routine. I have another friend, Max Stocelli from New Jersey, from Newark, New Jersey, comedian who's been on cruise ships was on cruise ships for about 35 years. He said, come on. We all steal everything. Jerry Lewis stole his entire act from other comics up in the Borscht Belt. We steal all the time. We don't call it stealing, but if we do steal and we do it better, it's ours. It's like Rodney Dangerfield didn't come up with I get no respect. That was George Schultz who said, I'm retiring, you use it, Rodney. So we don't know exactly about Musto, exactly about Abbott, exactly about Costello, other than Abbott might have done a piece of this routine in the 1920s before meeting Costello on the burlesque circuit. Abbott and Costello premiered the routine on the Kate Smith Show, and that was in March of 1938. They were bit players on the Kate Smith Show, but they had been working on this for a couple of years, and they probably got some help from Costello's writer, John Grant, and a guy by the name of Will Glickman, and the rest is history. They debut it, and Abbott and Costello would then perform it at the White House, in the movies, on radio, TV. They would perform before FDR, Franklin Roosevelt, and Harry Truman, and Dwight Eisenhower. Abbott and Costello were enshrined in baseball's Hall of Fame in 1956. Now, Vin Scully was the Dodger announcer until a couple of years ago. He started in Brooklyn in 1950, moved to Los Angeles with the team in 1957. And about 12 years ago, he's doing the simulcast on television and on radio. And he's looking at his screen, and he sees this baseball player up there. The guy's name is who? And Vin Scully says, now we know the answer to the eternal question of who's on first. There, ladies and gentlemen, is who. Who's on first? There was a what. Yeah, there was a what. He played second base. Who's on first? What's on second? He played second base before the routine became famous with the Washington Senators baseball team. But I can tell you this, guarantee you this, no ifs, no ands, no buts. Guarantee you this. There has never been a third baseman named, I don't know. A couple of years ago, 3 years ago, September, around this time, 3 years ago, I went up to Hyde Park because I needed to talk to Franklin Roosevelt. And it was a glorious day at the Presidential Library, but I needed to talk to Roosevelt about three things. I do a talk on the 1936 Olympics, wanted to know why the United States legitimized the Hitler regime by sending a team to Berlin. Two, Roosevelt was the first guy on commercial television or television outside of a laboratory in the United States. He welcomed people to the 1939 World's Fair. There were 400 television sets that could have gotten that broadcast on April 30th, 1939 in the New York City area. And I also want to know about one other thing, the green light letter. See, back in World War I, 1918, the United States was at war, and the season was curtailed on September 1st of 1918, and the World Series came right after that because baseball decided, the owners, at least National League, American League owners, decided to kill the season because of the war. The National League owners said, no, we're going to continue. Well, they didn't, but there was a World Series, in the Boston Red Sox, behind the left arm of Babe Ruth. Babe Ruth was the pitcher who pitched the Red Sox to the 1918 World Series. Anyway, this guy, Kennesaw Mountain Landis, didn't know what to do, really didn't know what to do. So he sends Roosevelt a letter saying, what do we do? Do we keep playing or we don't keep playing? Well, it's known as the green light letter. You could still see it at Hyde Park. And Roosevelt said, I honestly feel that it would be best for the country to keep baseball going. Baseball provides a recreation which does not last over 2 hours or 2.5 hours. Hasn't seen Red Sox-Yankee games over the last decade. Of course, Roosevelt's been dead for 75 years, and which incidentally, or which can be got for very little cost. Well, he hasn't sat in the box seats at Yankee Stadium or the luxury boxes or the club seats, but Roosevelt, his class, they could afford those seats. And incidentally, I hope that night games can be extended because it gives an opportunity to the day shift to see a game occasionally. With that letter, baseball plays. A lot of baseball players ended up in the armed forces. Hank Greenberg was the first baseball player to enlist in World War II, the day after the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941. I once spoke to Dan Rooney, who was the president of the Pittsburgh Steelers, and he told me because of Roosevelt and that letter, the National Football League was able to play during the war, along with the National Hockey League and whatever forms of basketball there were. Boxing, although Joe Louis was in the Army doing exhibitions, golf and tennis also continued during the war. Babe Ruth. Babe Ruth was in 10 movies during his baseball career and after his baseball career. And baseball in the movies, again, baseball didn't have to sell itself. The movies sold baseball. 1920, silent film, Heading Home, stars Babe as a baseball star. He starred in Babe Comes Home, a 1927 silent film. No print is available because those old prints, the way they were made, if you didn't preserve them, they weren't going to survive. They were going to eventually literally acid out. He also appeared in the Harold Lloyd silent movie in 1928, Speedy. That still survives. They kept it. He portrayed himself in a cameo role. Lloyd was a cab driver who the Babe spots, and Babe says, "Take me to Yankee Stadium," and Lloyd's one of the worst cab drivers you could imagine, but Babe eventually gets there. Ruth altogether was in 10 movies, the last one being the Lou Gehrig story, or Pride of the Yankees, in 1940. But the first baseball star was a guy by the name of Mike Dolan. Dolan played with the New York Giants. He was known as the baseball idol of Manhattan. He was a pretty good player in the dead ball era, hit .333, but took multiple breaks from the game to perform on stage and in vaudeville. He retires in 1914, goes straight into the movies, into a movie called Right Off the Bat, which featured the New York Giants manager, John McGraw. He made at least 53 appearances on film that people know of, and might have been in more, but those films, if they weren't preserved, they weren't going to last. Lou Gehrig was in the movie. It was called Rawhide. That was in 1938. And it was a terrible movie. It's basically Gehrig decides he's going to retire from the Yankees. He's had more than enough of the New York Yankees and the limelight, and he has to get away. He buys a ranch in Montana and decides to retire to relax in solitude, and he buys it with his sister. Doesn't make any sense because Gehrig is a New York City kid, goes to Columbia University, high school in New York, of course, Columbia University, plays with the New York Yankees, and does venture to New Rochelle, where he buys a house with his wife eventually. But the movie's terrible. It's a terrible movie. It's available if you want to see it up on YouTube. But there is one thing about this movie that is rather interesting. And that one thing about the movie is that doctors are able to see between the time he shoots this movie and he's diagnosed about 1.5 years later with the ALS, how far the disease ravaged his body, because they had some timeline because of the film. Gehrig would die 2 years after being diagnosed. Odd thing about the Yankees, Gehrig dying, and then the other thing, Babe Ruth. Babe Ruth got throat cancer, and eventually Babe Ruth would be one of the first people in the United States ever to be tested with chemotherapy to see if chemotherapy kind of worked in the beginning, and then it just faded off. But you know, you think of Gehrig and Ruth as great baseball players, and you don't think of their contribution to. Hang on. I think we froze there, and you don't think of their contribution to the medical profession, but there was a contribution to the medical profession by both Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig. Film opens, Gehrig is at Grand Central Terminal saying he's retiring from baseball, goes into a train, he's gone, he's out in Montana. Bugs Bunny was in a baseball cartoon. Everything I learned in life came from Warner Brothers cartoons, the greatest animated comic of all time. He's a heckler in this cartoon, and he's heckling the Gas House Gorillas, saying, I could beat them with one arm tied behind my back. He would beat them, but not with one arm tied behind his back. He replaces the teetotalers who are getting slaughtered by the Gas House Gorillas. Some of the movies. That is League of Their Own, and that is Madonna jumping into Rosie O'Donnell's arms. Gina Davis with the chest protector. Tom Hanks is in this movie playing a character based on Jimmy Fox. No crying in baseball. I knew a guy by the name of Casey Candell. Casey Candell was a player with the Montreal Expos in the 1990s, and we got to talking about this movie. And he was telling me he was the technical director. Why? Because his mother played in this league. This league was founded by Phil Wrigley, the chewing gum magnate. Double juicy fruit and double mint and spearmint gum, among other things that they put out. And the league lasted between, say, 1943 and 1952, and Casey was the technical advisor, using his mother's notes to make sure that it was as authentic as possible. Other movies you probably know: Pride of the Yankees. There's Gary Cooper. Gary Cooper was right-handed, grew up in Montana, never played baseball. The scenes done as he's reenacting Gehrig were done in a mirror to make him left-handed. Nuke LaLoosh, Crash Davis, Bull Durham. Written by Ron Shelton, came out around 1988. The Tim Robbins character, LaLoosh, is based on a guy by the name of Steve Dalkowski, who just passed away. Ron Shelton, who was the writer, was a minor league baseball player who was the teammate of Dalkowski, who struck out a lot of people, walked a lot of people, fastest guy anybody ever saw, but had no control of his game and of his life off the field. And this is a movie about the veteran catcher, Kevin Costner, Crash Davis, trying to make sure that LaLoosh does not go down the wrong path and blow out his career. And they're both fighting for the affection of Susan Sarandon, Baseball Annie. Jerry Lewis, that is the Geisha Boy, and he is with the Los Angeles Dodger players filming that movie. When O'Malley moves the Dodgers from Brooklyn to Los Angeles, the Dodgers become the darling of Hollywood, both in movies and on TV. Robert Redford starred in The Natural, a book that you probably have at the library. There's Costner again, Field of Dreams. There he's talking to Joe Jackson, who comes out of a Iowa cornfield. Major League Baseball was supposed to have played a game this year in an Iowa cornfield between the Yankees and the White Sox, but that was wiped out because of COVID-19. They're hoping to do that again, or do that for the first time next year. There is Brad Pitt as Billy Beane, who is the smartest guy in baseball. All you have to do is ask him, and he will tell you that. The book Moneyball became a movie about the Oakland A's, and I'm sure that's in the library as well. Walter Matthau in The Bad News Bears. Chico Bail Bonds, the sponsor of the Bad News Bears. Major League, there is Charlie Sheen. Cleveland Indians win the World Series. That is Forbes Field in Pittsburgh. That is me about 2 years ago, a little less than 2 years ago, and I was at the University of Pittsburgh, and I'm walking around, and I decided to go to what looks to be the remaining wall of Forbes Field, which is right in the middle of the University of Pittsburgh. And the wall is still up there, the last vestige of Forbes Field, which was in the middle of Shenley Park, right near the University of Pittsburgh. And the reason I put that up is that Bing Crosby was part owner of the Pittsburgh Pirates at one time. Bill Veeck sold a small chunk of the Cleveland Indians to Bob Hope in 1946. Hope was a local guy, grew up as a fan of the Indians, and jumped at the chance to own a small share of his hometown team. Meanwhile, his road partner in the movies, Bing Crosby, invested in the Pittsburgh Pirates that same year, and suggested that a movie should be shot at Forbes Field called Angels in the Outfield. So some of the movies that you probably remember: Pride of the Yankees, Bull Durham, Rookie of the Year, Major League, Angels in the Outfield, Field of Dreams, Geisha Boy, Bad News Bears, The Natural, and Moneyball. Homer Simpson scores the winning run in a game against Major League players for the Springfield Nuclear Power Plant. They are the city champions. There is Smithers holding the trophy, and Monty Burns, which leads to the question: if I was in your place right now, I'd have this. Is Homer Simpson in baseball's Hall of Fame? You could type your answer in, and we'll give you the answer about 20 minutes from now. There is Sandy Koufax, and he is signing an autograph either for Mr. Ed or Wilbur Allen Post. Sandy Koufax was in Mr. Ed. Leo DeRocher signed Herman Munster to a contract with the Los Angeles Dodgers in the Munsters. Simple story. Herman's out there with his son, Eddie Wolfgang Munster, All-American family, and they're out there and he's just hitting long fly balls. And Leo, who never met a morning he liked, Leo was out all night, but he happened to be walking by this park and he hears the crack of the bat and then all of a sudden pulls a contract out and signs Herman Munster. You know, it's TV. Anyway, Herman goes to try out for the Dodgers. He's 7'6", weighs 540 pounds, injures a bunch of the Dodger players. They have to release him. Elroy Crazy Legs Hirsch, the general manager of the National Football League's Los Angeles Rams, a couple months later, happens to stumble by the same park. And he happens to see Herman kicking footballs to Eddie Wolfgang Munster. And he comes out running with a contract. Now, he could sign the player as the general manager of the team. And Leo comes running out of the same bushes. No, 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 don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. The Munsters. Herman Munster also tried out with the Dodgers. The guy on the left there is Jim Lefevre. On the right is Al Ferrara. Al Ferrara once said he knew he made it to the major leagues when he had one of these, a baseball card. And here they play headhunters, and they're looking to shrink a skull, and they're looking to shrink Gilligan's skull. Come to think of it, there's so many people that went through that island. How come these people were never rescued, the 7 castaways? As Lefevre said, I'm glad they weren't because I still get residual checks. I don't know how he got residual checks and the others didn't. None of them got residual checks on all over the place. Lefevre claimed he did. He was the manager of the Seattle Mariners when I talked to him about that. Johnny Roseboro. This looks very Dragnet, doesn't it? He was on Dragnet. Dragnet 1968. Walter O'Malley, the Dodger owner, appeared with the Rifleman star in the one-time Brooklyn Dodgers first baseman Chuck Connors in Branded, a TV show in 1965. Willie Davis acted in The Love Machine. He was in Jerry Lewis's movie, Which Way to the Front, and The Flying Nun. Johnny Roseboro, not only was he in Dragnet 1968, but Brooks Law, Kraft Suspense Theater, Mr. Ed, and Experiment in Terror. Now, if I was live, I'd ask you the question, who's that guy on the left, who's that guy on the right? But I'm kind of live with Zoom, but not really interactive with you because when I do talk, it's more interactive because I'll ask you questions like, who's that on the left? That is Phil Silvers on the left, star of the Phil Silvers Show, or You'll Never Get Rich, or Sergeant Bilko, depending on what round of syndication there is. And on the right is Steve Bilko. Steve Bilko was a great minor league player with the Los Angeles Angels in the 1950s, got up to the major leagues, wasn't good enough for the major leagues, too good for the minor leagues, so he bounced back and forth. He would end his career with the American League Los Angeles Angels expansion team in 1961. Steve Bilko, Nat Hiken was the writer and producer of the Bilko Show, and he saw Steve Bilko play. That's it. That's the name I want. I want that name for my character. And that's how Bilko got his name, Bilko, which leads me to a Yogi story. Number 1 Yogi story. Like I said, I spoke a lot at his museum, and I got to see him over the years, many, many times over the years. And I said, hey, Yogi, you and the Yankees, they were on the Bilko. You were on the Bilko Show. What were you doing at Fort Baxter in Kansas? We weren't in Kansas. Oh, I know that. I know that, but you're on the TV show. No, we weren't in Kansas. What? No, but you were. No. We went on the George Washington Bridge on the Cross Bronx, took the second exit, and went to the studio. That's where we were. At that point, I knew Yogi beat me. Wasn't any sense continuing because he was right. Donna Reed Show, Brady Bunch, Mr. Ed, the Munsters, Phil Silvers Show, also known as Bilko. Yogi was on the Phil Silvers Show, Don Drysdale on the Brady Bunch, Donna Reed. Baseball players made it, but a lot of Dodgers, it's mostly Dodgers in the 1960s that were on TV. Aaron Spelling, who did probably, as he called it, schlock TV, which he did, Charlie's Angels, Love Boat, Fantasy Island, all were Aaron Spelling. Didn't take much of a brain to watch it. That's the way they were designed. They were designed as cotton candy with a lot of good-looking people on the shows. He used the Baseball Encyclopedia to name his TV characters, and he named Captain Stubing after Moose Stubing, who was a minor league baseball player and eventually the manager of the Anaheim Angels. He named Moose Stubing after Moose Stubing, the Captain Merrill Stubing of the Love Boat. John Forsythe landed his first paying job as the ballpark announcer at Ebbets Field for the Brooklyn Dodgers in the 1950s. He was also the unseen voice of Charlie's Angels. He wasn't seen at Ebbets Field. He wasn't seen on Charlie's Angels, but you did hear his voice. He would star in one of Spelling's greatest hits, Dynasty, in the 1980s. And there is Moose Stubing, and there is John Forsythe with Jack Lemmon. He full circle there, you know, Dodger announcer, and he plays for the Dodgers in the Hollywood All-Star Game. And he's, of course, been seen, but Aaron Spelling decided not to show him during Charlie's Angels. And there's Bob Uecker, Mr. Baseball. And Bob Uecker had an interesting career. He was a baseball announcer from 1971 to last year with the Milwaukee Brewers. He was a major league catcher, or so he said, because he had one of these, he told Johnny Carson, a baseball card. And it was Al Hurt who discovered him. Uecker's career was done with the Atlanta Braves. He played with the Milwaukee Braves. He played with the St. Louis Cardinals, the Phillies, and was in Atlanta. And he's banging around working for the Braves as a club ambassador in the community, and also trying a stand-up comedy routine. And Al Hurt, the trumpet player, who was the first trumpet player, first guy who did the national anthem at what was called the American Football League, National Football League World Championship game, now known as the Super Bowl, calls Johnny Carson and says, Johnny, I just saw a great comic. You got to have him on the show. He says, what's his name? Bob Uecker. Never heard of him. Well, Uecker goes on the show, kills. Johnny invites him to the couch, which means that, you know, if you got Carson's approval, you're going to be great. And Carson, during the break, leans over to him and says, is it true that you're a baseball player? He said, yeah, I got a baseball card, so I must be. Johnny nicknames him Mr. Baseball, and he made many appearances on the Tonight Show. I got to know him in the 1980s, partly out of the Miller Beer All-Stars. Yogi was there, Mark Throneberry was there, Boom Boom Jeffrey on John Madden, who I work with. All those guys part of the Miller All-Stars. Uecker went on to be part of Mr. Belvedere. He's in baseball's Hall of Fame, not because he could play, but because he was funny and people liked him. Broadway, remember I told you baseball didn't have to really sell itself. It just crept into the culture. Broadway, whatever Lola wants, Lola gets. Damn Yankees, 1954, about the Washington Senators, the Senators. Actually, they didn't have all that long a drought. They had won the World Series in 1933, but they were losing. Washington, first in war, first in peace, last in the American League, and Joe Hardy decides to sell his soul to the devil so Washington can win. There was one other big song that came out of Damn Yankees, and that was You Gotta Have Heart. By the way, nobody, as far as I can tell, sold their soul for Washington to win last year the World Series. You gotta have heart. That's what the Amazing Mets sung on the 1969 Ed Sullivan Show after the Mets win the World Series. My cousin is Jerry Stiller. Jerry and I used to talk a lot about Ed Sullivan, and Stiller and Mirror were on the show 3 dozen, 4 dozen times. And Jerry told me, he said, Ed started as a ring announcer. He was a sports writer for the New York Daily News, and they needed somebody to be the ring announcer, dropping the microphone there for the amateur Golden Gloves. Ed did it. In that corner is so-and-so, in that corner is so-and-so. Here they are, the Beatles. What you watch was a guy who was a ring announcer. He didn't know what to do, so he went back to being a ring announcer. Art Shamsky, who's got the double-breasted 6-button suit. I still deal with him occasionally. Ron Swoboda is in New Orleans next to Art Shamsky. Front row at the left, Seaver is back there. He just passed away. To his right, 3 in, is Tug McGraw, who used to nickname his pitches. His curveball was called Bo Derek because it had a little tail on it, being politically incorrect. And his fastball, the Peggy Lee, for the song, Is That All There Is? Is That All There Is? Tug McGraw passed away a number of years ago. Did talk about Jerry Stiller, and Jerry Stiller was, of course, on the show. George Steinbrenner and NBC, for some reason, were able to have some sort of love affair because George Steinbrenner once hosted Saturday Night Live, where he was he was lampooned. He was George Steinbrenner, played every position for the Yankees, coached the Yankees, managed the Yankees, GM the Yankees, owned the Yankees. And to be honest, that wasn't all that much of a stretch. Saturday Night Live also did Chico Escuela Night. Remember Chico Escuela, played by Garrett Morris, and they did that in St. Petersburg, Florida one night. But George did not initially like the Seinfeld show. And Jerry Stiller and I were talking about who wrote some of those scripts. Well, George didn't exactly write scripts, but he suggested scripts to Larry David, and Larry David turned them into shows. So you're going to learn something there. And you're going to learn at least 3 episodes that George heavily was involved with. The storyline suggested by George: missing George Costanza, board meeting moved, different uniforms. Now, as you might know, Jerry Stiller, as I told you, is my cousin. He also played the role of Frank Costanza. And Jerry and I talked about it quite a few times. And the Missing George episode was based on something that happened in Tampa, Florida. George owned American Shipbuilding, American Ship. And he had one employee that George, he kind of hung out with kind of guys that you really shouldn't hang out with, George thought. So it's a Friday, and George leaves the office, and he sees all the cars in the parking lot. And George usually got to his office before anybody else did. But he leaves, and he gets there on Monday, and he's looking around. He sees this guy's car there. Right away, figure, oh, something's going on here. He's missing. He's missing. And he starts to panic, and he calls the Tampa Police Department to put an all-points bulletin out for this guy who is missing. The guy ended up going away with friends just for a couple of days and eventually would come back to work. But they turned that into a story, Missing George Costanza. And the best part of that for me is when George Steinbrenner, played by the actor, goes, knocks on the door, Mr. Costanza, we think George is dead. And Jerry Stiller, my cousin, looks at the actor and he says, you traded Jay Buhner for Ken Phelps? You traded Jay Buhner for Ken Phelps? Jay Buhner had a pretty good career with Seattle. Ken Phelps wiped out with the Yankees. Board meeting moved. If you knew anything about George, you knew that your food was his food. And he had no problems borrowing your food. And this story was told to me by either Joe Safety or Dave Zen or Rick Cerrone or one of his PR guys. And there was a meeting at Yankee Stadium, and somebody brought in calzone, and George said, "Who brought in the calzone? Where'd you get it?" And they picked up the entire meeting and went down to an Italian place by Yankee Stadium and had the meeting there because George wanted the calzone. Different uniforms, they tried a different type of material in Tampa, and the uniform shrunk, and they made a story out of that. George was actually on the show, or was supposed to be on the show. He actually auditioned. He was supposed to play a part where he's talking here. You see the Julia Louis-Dreyfus. It's terrible. You go up on YouTube, you can see it. It's just a terrible, terrible scene. He actually did a scene in the show, Seinfeld said, and it was terrible. We couldn't use it. We cut him out. He wasn't funny. I don't remember exactly what went wrong with it, but it was quite an awkward situation. Keith Hernandez. I did this talk in Bethpage a number of years ago, about 3 years ago, and Bethpage out in Long Island. And a Mets fan said, "You don't have anything about the Mets." And I said, "Well, do you want to hear about Keith Hernandez or not?" And I threw Keith Hernandez in. Keith was on the show for the final show. And also, if you remember, George Costanza got jealous because Jerry and Keith started hanging around, and Keith also started dating the Julia Louis-Dreyfus character, Elaine Bennis, and they broke up because Keith smoked in those days. And there was also the recreation of the Kennedy assassination with the spitball and Roger McDowell in one of the episodes with Keith Hernandez. Hernandez said when his agent, Scott Boras, who's still around in 2020, when Boras asked him, "You want to be on Seinfeld?" He said, "What's that?" Boras explained they'd fly him out first class, have him in a nice hotel for a week, and pay him $15 grand. Keith said, Jerry and I are old buddies. Sure, I'll do the show. But they became buddies, and Scott Boras is still around in 2020. Last year, he took in like $35 million to do 3 contracts last year, some nonsense like that. Scott Boras. I was going to take this out of the presentation because who knows of Wally Pipp? But I watched the opening episode of Jeopardy last Monday, and there was the $1,200 question on baseball about Wally Pipp. And I said, it's season 37 of Jeopardy. I am not, in the season opener of Jeopardy, I am going to leave Wally Pipp in here because if it's good enough for Jeopardy, it's good enough for me, even though this happened 95 years ago. And there was a saying when I was a kid, don't get Wally Pipp. Don't get Wally Pipp. Wally Pipp was the Yankee first baseman, replaced by Lou Gehrig in 1925, June 2nd, 1925, because allegedly he had a headache. The real story, Gehrig was tearing up the Eastern League. The Yankees wanted him up to see what he could do, and for the next nearly 14 years, he played first base every game. And Wally Pipp lost his job. To be Wally Pipp, that was Jeopardy last week. Last week, it's Wally Pipp lost his job to this man, and I said, if it's on Jeopardy, it's good enough for me to do the talk. The Myth lost the job to Gehrig on June 2nd, 1925, because of a headache. That's the Myth. The moral of the story, don't call in sick because someone else will do your job and they may do it better. So thank you, the writers of Jeopardy, for including Wally Pipp and keeping this in the talk. Cigarettes and beer, big sponsors. Old Gold cigarettes, Babe Ruth. If you look closely, it looks like Babe Ruth is sitting on Old Sparky and Sing Sing, ready to be electrocuted. Old Gold cigarettes, smoother and better. As I said, Babe Ruth died of throat cancer. Now the cough in a carload. Always buy Chesterfield, and look who's pitching Chesterfield. Bucky Harris, the Yankee manager. Bob Elliott, National League MVP. Ted Williams. Stan the Man Musial. Joe DiMaggio, who I guarantee you did not pay for that cigarette. Well, he got paid for the ad. And Ewell Blackwell. Always milder, better tasting, cooler smoking. Always buy Chesterfield. Yoo-hoo, the drink of champions. Now, I knew Joe Garagiola also. Yogi and Joe were friends from the time they were 2 years old. Back up, and I'm going to be politically incorrect with this, but this is how they refer to where their home was in St. Louis, up Dago Hill. Now, Yogi and Joey, as Yogi called him, Joey, knew each other from the age they were 2 until Yogi passing away a number of years ago. Joe used to say, Yogi, when he stepped in it, and he usually found a gusher. Yoo-hoo, the drink of champions. I'm not sure if Mickey Mantle really drank Yoo-hoo. And it seems like a stretch. I know what he drank, and it was a little stronger than Yoo-hoo, which was only chocolate and water. Vile tasting to me, but a lot of people liked it. Moose Gowan, one of my favorite people of all time, great storyteller. He was with Washington at the time, Yogi's teammate. He drank Yoo-hoo. Ellie Howard drank Yoo-hoo as well. Now, here's what Garagiola meant. Yogi meets the founding Oliveri family of the New Jersey Country Club in 1955. Yoo-hoo cannot get distributed. It's not on food shelves at supermarkets. So they give Yogi the drink. Yogi tastes the drink, and the Oliveris are with bated breath, want to know, what do you think? I like it. And he did. He liked it. Yogi's on board. Gets a percentage of Yoo-hoo. Gets it onto the shelves. Dave Kaplan told me this story, one of Yogi's books, which, Joe, you might have in the library. One time I was in the office and the phone rang when no one else was around. I always answer a ringing phone, so I did. A woman who was calling asked if Yoo-hoo was hyphenated. I said, no, ma'am, it's not even carbonated. Yogi sold Kraft Italian dressing. For me, it's got everything. Sure makes swell salads. I am old enough. I am 64 years old. I am old enough to remember when you put water in car batteries. You don't do that anymore, but I remember that. I did it twice a year, but my car was in 1966, and I had the car in 1973. I was 17 years old. Yogi Berra says, I add water only 3 times a year. Yogi says, go get your Press-to-Light high-level battery. Yogi pitched beer. So did Marv Thornberry for Miller Lite, and there's Yogi. Yogi's in the commercial. Marv Thornberry's words, I don't know why they want me in this commercial. And bicycles. This Christmas, ask your mom and dad for Shelby, the winner's bike. Yogi also ate mapo, and Yogi went to the movies, and his last commercial was Affleck, where he drives the duck crazy. Joe D. in Maryland. Phil Rizzuto once said, when Joe D. retired, he says, I'm so happy he's retired. Now I don't have to pay for his dinners anymore. Scooter and Joe D. Anyway, they're at the Stock Club. That's Marilyn Monroe, of course. Joe didn't pay for that drink. He didn't pay for that cigarette. He probably didn't pay for that dinner either. Joe D. in Maryland, the romance of the baseball star and the blonde bombshell, the dumb blonde bombshell. Nobody played dumb better ever than Marilyn Monroe. Jane Mansfield tried, couldn't do it. Mamie Van Doren, who I know, I once asked her about it, and she said there was nobody in Marilyn's class playing the dumb blonde. She was actually, from what they tell me, from people who knew her, very intelligent. She was pen pals with Albert Einstein. But anyway, she marries DiMaggio. January 14th, 1954, they elope. October 1954, Marilyn Monroe files for divorce, citing only mental cruelty, and a lot had to do with the day that Joe DiMaggio watched the filming of this scene. Well, he didn't watch the filming of this scene because this was Stamford, Connecticut in 2017, and I'm with 26-foot Marilyn. By the way, Marilyn's derriere is facing the front door of the First Congregational Church, which did not make the Stamford churchgoers very happy, and to my left and her left was another church, and you saw the side of her halter and the skirt upflip, which didn't make those churchgoers too happy either. But apparently the night that they went home, Joe, there was something happened and she filed for divorce. I've heard stories. I cannot verify the stories, but I've heard stories over the years. Anyway, that's 26-foot Marilyn. And they got divorced. And she went on to Arthur Miller. But Joe always thought that he was going to remarry her. She died in 1962. I was speaking on a Princess cruise ship to Hawaii back in 2008. And there was a retired LA detective who came to my talks, as did Larry Durker, the former Houston Astros pitcher's mother, who came to all my talks. They did 8 on the ship. And he told me that he was at the scene because that was his sector. He said that Judy Garland and Sid Luft used to have fistfights every Thursday night over money, and no cop wanted to break them up. But he said it was routine to go to these people's houses. And he said that Marilyn died a junkie's death. She mixed pills with alcohol. Joe wanted a few things from a wife. He wanted a wife who was willing to stay at home. That wasn't Marilyn. He wanted a wife who would make him dinner every night. That wasn't Marilyn. He wanted a wife who made less money than him. That wasn't Marilyn. And he wanted a wife who was less famous than him. That wasn't Marilyn. He struck out 4 times, which is amazing considering how few times he struck out in his Major League Baseball career. He's in the song, Mrs. Robinson, that I wrote 50,000 times. He's also in the song, We Didn't Start the Fire by Billy Joel. Joe DiMaggio, Joe DiMaggio, 1940 song. Jackie Robinson, Did You See Jackie Hit the Ball by Duke Ellington. And Mickey by Teresa Brewer. Baseball didn't have to sell itself. Other people were selling baseball in the American culture. Now, you probably heard Mrs. Robinson 15,000 times or more. Paul Simon wrote it. Simon and Garfunkel sung it. The line, Where Have You Gone, Joe DiMaggio, is in there, except the Frank Sinatra version, because Sinatra hated DiMaggio, or DiMaggio hated Sinatra, because he thought that Sinatra, being Joe, introduced Marilyn to the Kennedys, and the Kennedys killed Marilyn, and he never forgave Frank for that. But anyway, to get to this story, Johnny Blanchard was telling me the story, dropping names here, Yankee Old Timers Day. Johnny was kind of a keeper of the flame for Roger Maris and others. And he was telling me, he said, you ever hear the story about Joe DiMaggio meeting Paul Simon? I said, no. He said, well, they met for dinner, And Joe walks in, he sits down, he says, what do you mean, where have I gone? I've been here, I haven't gone anywhere. I did a Bowery commercial, I did Mr. Coffee. Remember Bowery Savings Bank? That was Joe. He said, I did all these commercials, I haven't gone anywhere. And Paul Simon decides to go intellectual on him. Big mistake. Of course, Paul Simon wanted to be a lawyer if he wasn't in music. It's a big mistake to go into intellectual with Joe. I know, I interviewed Joe over the years. He kept it simple. Joe had nothing to say. And he says, well, you know, he says, you were my hero, and heroes are hard to come by, and you left me in 1951, and I'm 10 years old, and you never came back. So I want to know, where'd you go? He said, I didn't go anywhere. I'm here. I didn't go anywhere. Eventually, DiMaggio accepted the story, left with Paul Simon paying the bill. Now, Dick Cavett had Paul Simon on, and Dick Cavett had the story not only with Joe DiMaggio, but also Mickey Mantle, because Mickey Mantle was not happy that Joe DiMaggio was used in the song. And Mickey once asked Paul Simon about that. They hated each other. DiMaggio would look to his left, and he was jealous. He's 37 years old, has a bad leg, his career is almost over, and he sees the most beautiful man ever created in Mickey Mantle. He is chiseled. He is built like a Greek god, and his name is Mantle. Mantle, from the earth. He's from the earth, and he's got that flowing blonde hair. He could run like the wind. He's got all this power. He can hit from both sides of the plate. He's jealous. There's a fly ball, hits a right center field during the 1951 World Series at Yankee Stadium. Mickey's running like the wind and trips over a sprinkler. Joe goes over. Mickey always thought that DiMaggio loafed on the ball, ripped up his knee, and injured his career. Never forgave Joe for that. So they hated one another. So Cavett knew the background of all these stories. And he goes on the Cavett show. Before I say that, Mickey Mantle asked Paul Simon. He says, why not? Why him? Why not me? Because Paul Simon said, Mickey Mantle doesn't sound as good as Joe DiMaggio in the song. Mickey accepted that. Eventually, Paul Simon would have Mickey hitting in the Me and Julio Down by the Schoolyard video. Mickey hitting left, of course, because he couldn't hit right because his knees were shot. Now, Paul Simon is on the Dick Cavett show. He says, I said that I didn't mean the lines literally. I thought of him as an American hero, and that genuine heroes were in short supply. In fact, the song was going to be Mrs. Roosevelt, as in Eleanor Roosevelt, until Mike Nichols heard the song, producer and writer of The Graduate, where the snippet of the song was in. He said, from now on, it's Mrs. Robinson, not Mrs. Roosevelt. Anyway, Paul said he accepted the explanation. He thanked me. We shook hands, said good night. And Cavett said, why wasn't Mantle's name used? Simon said, all about syllables, Dick. It's about how many beats there are. Terry Cashman and I share the same periodontist in the Bronx. Terry Cashman is now working on the Jim Croce anthology, which I thought was going to be out for Christmas. He was Jim Croce's producer before Jim was killed in a plane crash back, I think, in 1973 or 1974. But Terry Cashman became baseball's balladeer. He played 2 years of minor league baseball, pitched for the Detroit Tigers organization. And here we go with Joe again. Willie, Mickey, and the Duke talking baseball, Terry Cashman. And if you look at that record sleeve very closely, there is a gaping hole in there, like our periodontist taking out a tooth. There's Duke, there's Claude Rains, the Invisible Man, there's Willie, and there's Mickey. Well, Joe was supposed to be in that picture, and he was airbrushed out, probably just as well. Talking baseball, Willie, Mickey, and the Duke, performed and written by Terry Cashman, 1981. No Joe DiMaggio. Scooter. Scooter never thought he was funny. Scooter never thought he had any good stories to tell. He did. He is the only guy in baseball's Hall of Fame who has a gold record. Story very simple. I knew Meatloaf a little bit about 20 years ago. His daughter played in a softball league around here in Westchester, and I would see him at Yankee games and New York Giants games. Former football player in Texas, even though he's like 5'6". Anyway, they wanted Rizzuto for their record, Paradise by the Dashboard Light. The album Bat Out of Hell was supposed to be a Broadway play. It never materialized, but they had the songs. And they wanted Scooter just to be Scooter and do the play-by-play of a teenage guy or a guy in his 20s with a girl in a car. And basically, the guy wanted to, because this might be a family thing, let's say cement the relationship or score the winning run. We are talking about baseball. Rizzuto took about 100 takes before they got Phil Rizzuto to be Phil Rizzuto. He probably thought he was Olivier. He's supposed to do play-by-play of this base runner who is aggressive, nearly gets called out at second base, third base, and he comes home on the suicide squeeze, and he's safe at home. Scooter claimed he told me this, I never knew it was about sex until my kids told me so. They were going to school when the record came out. They were going to college in Boston at the time. And they said, Dad, you know what that's about? You, that Huckleberry, he fooled me. Same guy who did games with Bill White. And Bill White one day is talking about some pitcher, and he says, that pitcher has got good rhythm tonight. And Phil says, me and Corey use the rhythm method. I need a drum. Rim shot. Rizzuto, I miss him. Baseball cards, baseball cards, baseball cards. Picture cards. I was, about 12, 13 years ago, I was over in New Jersey near Westfield, and I was talking in the senior home. And I was talking about my relationship with baseball cards, particularly in 1964. And I was talking about Mrs. Charles, my third grade teacher. Stole all of our baseball cards. She took all of the baseball cards of all the kids. And I'm still upset about that. That happened in 1964. It's 56 years ago. She took my baseball cards. It wasn't like my mother threw out my baseball cards, because I've heard some stories. One guy in Montville, New Jersey said that his mother threw out $60,000 worth of baseball cards when he was out in the Army. She wanted to clean his room. He didn't forgive her. Well, kind of, but he really didn't. But anyway, I'm talking about Mrs. Charles. And there's a woman. She's slinking. She's like this. She's like this. It's Roseland, New Jersey. And I said, "Are you Mrs. Charles?" She said, "I had to do it." You had to do it? What'd you have to do? I had to take the cards. 5 cents. Stick of bubble gum. Bubble gum made dentists, periodontists, and oral surgeons really happy, because that bubble gum, Seiberger threw the bubble gum in there with the cards. Seiberger, the father of the modern baseball card. And periodontists and oral surgeons loved him, because it was like biting into, oh, I don't know, the top of a table. Ruined your teeth. You had to take, you took it. Why? Well, yeah, a 6-year-old boy, and I wanted the boy to like me because I liked the guy. He said, "You took my baseball cards from a 6-year-old? Yeah. 5 cents. Couldn't buy them." So what happened? We broke up. You broke up? What happened? Kid didn't like me. And you took my baseball cards. Baseball cards. Baseball cards were kind of the internet of their day, because the back of the baseball card could teach you how to add, subtract, multiply, and divide if you wanted to follow your favorite player and wanted up-to-date statistics. Also gambling. I bet you didn't realize that doing that, flipping cards, and usually, hey, I won that, both tails. Flipping cards was your entree into gambling, because you gambled your cards because you want to get other people's cards. Also taught you about trading, insider trading. You always kept your Willie Mays and your Mickey Mantle and your Sandy Koufax on the bottom, and you made believe you didn't have them because you're trying to trade baseball cards, and you were always trying to get those baseball cards. So that was gambling. That was your entree to gambling, because, you know, we were gambling your cards away. Geography, where a team is located. This one is Cleveland. So we could look up on the map where Cleveland was. And they made great bicycle flaps. You put that card in with the clothespin, and it just whirled and whirled and whirled and made a great sound. Baseball cards. Well, baseball was important to the culture, but it is dying down. There are really no new songs about baseball. No real new literature. Oh, yeah, there are a couple books here and there. Moneyball, which you have, is one of them, but there's no Old Man in the Sea with Ernest Hemingway, which brings up another Yogi story. In the 1950s, Ernest Hemingway came to the Yankee clubhouse, and they're introducing him. Ernest Hemingway, Hank Bauer, Ernest Hemingway, blah, 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 blah. They get down to Yogi. Ernest Hemingway, Yogi Berra. Yogi Berra, Ernest Hemingway. Yogi sticks out his hand and says, "What paper you write for, Ernie?" Kansas City Star, right? There aren't too many new movies that really propel baseball into the culture. It's just another sport these days. Homer Simpson is in Baseball's Hall of Fame, honored in 2017, but just Homer, not Marge, not Maggie, not Bart, not Lisa, just Homer. Homer is in the Hall of Fame. Along with Casey at the Bat, the poem, the song from 1985, John Fogerty's Center Field, League of Their Own, the movie, and of course, Who's on First. That's Joe Namath. That's me, my buddy Bruce Morton, who has seen this talk too many times on Zoom, so I didn't invite him today. Anyway, we're talking to Joe Namath. Joe Namath, of course, cements the Super Bowl with the Jets' win in 1969, although football had passed baseball by 1965 as the most popular sport in the United States, and that is a 1988 photo. Lost a couple hairs since then. Oh well, what are you gonna do? 1950, baseball, horse racing, boxing dominated American sports by 65. According to the Harris poll, football surpassed baseball. That is me and Muhammad Ali. 1985, boxing started to decline after Ali's glory years in the 1970s. Last two fights, you probably don't want to remember the Larry Holmes and Trevor Berbick fights. They were awful for Ali, but he has a legacy. Horse racing survives because there are casinos in horse racing, or there are casinos at horse racing tracks today, many of them, and that's how horse racing survives. That is Jim Bouton. And Joe, you probably have the best baseball book ever written, Ball 4. That's at Yogi Berra's museum. The only time Jim and I were on stage together, passing. He was coming off, I was going on for the next talk. I was the keynote speaker, believe it or not, because the keynote speaker didn't show up at Yogi Berra's museum. Jim and I had a relationship. We'd crisscross a lot, but we never spoke together. And he wrote Ball 4, released June 19th, 1978. We learned Mickey Mantle drank and other things about baseball players. They were human beings after all. Bowie Kuhn, the commissioner of baseball, called Bouton in and said, renounce the book. Everything was fiction. Bouton refused to do that. Humanized Players, one of the 20 most influential books of the 20th century, according to the New York Public Library. It was used as part of the arbitration when Peter Seitz ended the reserve clause in 1975. And I'm sure it's in the library. All you have to do is ask Jill and she will find it for you. I was in a soccer movie in 2015 called The Sons of Ben at the Trocadero Theater in Philadelphia for its world premiere. Soccer movies. There are more soccer fields near Shea Stadium or where the Mets play at Flushing than there are baseball fields at Flushing Meadow Park these days. There's even cricket fields, but not too many baseball fields. And we end with Yogi, of course, because, you know, hey, if you want directions to his house when you see a fork in the road, take it. Nobody goes to that restaurant anymore because it's too crowded. Carmen, his wife, once said to him, you know, Tim went to go see Dr. Zhivago, Tim, his son. He said, what's wrong with him now? We're coming to World Series time. And in World Series time, it used to get late early out there in left field, the shadows at Yankee Stadium. And you better go to somebody's funeral. You better go to somebody's funeral because if you don't go to their funeral, they're not going to your funeral. Carmen once said to Yogi, Yogi, you were born in St. Louis, played in New York, and lived here in New Jersey. Where do you want to be buried? Yogi said, surprise me. It ain't over until it's over, and it ain't over yet. And of course, Yogi's most famous saying, it ain't over until it's over. Yogi has been quoted before in arguments before the Supreme Court more than anybody in United States Supreme Court history. So it's 1973 rather, 1973. And Mike Dyer, who's now about 78 years old and lives in Sarasota, Florida, was a reporter for the Long Island Press. New York Mets are stumbling. They're not a very good baseball team in 1973 because Seaver is hurt and Brody is hurt and a lot of people are hurt. M. Donald Grant, the chairman of the board, gets the Mets together before a game without Yogi and starts giving him a pep talk, and Tug McGraw comes out, you got to believe, you got to believe, you got to believe. Mets get their players back. They're within striking distance all of a sudden of the top of the National League East to get to the playoffs. But time's running out, and they cannot afford to lose too many more games, or they're going to get eliminated. So the Mets lose a game, and it's at Shea Stadium, and all the writers crowd around Yogi, and Mike Dyer is there. This is 1973, and I wish I had a better story for you, but I don't. But I do have the story. So Mike Dyer says to Yogi, you lost. Getting late. Is it over? Yogi's response, it ain't over till it's over. So I want to thank you so much for spending some time with me. Thank you, Jill, so much for inviting me. I hope that you enjoyed the little program that I gave you. And when I'm in different cities, I tell kind of different stories, but still mostly Yogi stories and Yankee stories, because I hung around. I knew a lot of the old Yankees, but it's over. So it's up to you to now talk to me or share whatever you want about baseball with me. Any questions, comments?
If you want to ask questions, go ahead and unmute yourself. There aren't any in the chat, but feel free to go ahead and ask questions.
Yeah, I got one.
Go ahead, Daniel. I see you.
As far as baseball books go, have you ever read Cardboard Gods by Josh Wilker?
I know the book, but I never did. But I used to work for Sports Collectors Digest. But I know of the book, but I never read it. Go ahead.
Yeah.
No, you were going to say something about it?
Well, if you're looking to find out how card collecting affected a later generation, that's the source.
Oh, okay. The kids aren't collecting baseball cards today.
Well, I'm talking, those who came, it's
50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s.
Well, it's about growing up in the 70s
70s, okay.
and collecting cards.
Yeah. I was a teenager already. So my baseball card collecting days were done. Anybody else? Well, I want to thank Jill for inviting me. I hope everybody enjoyed it. And hope we could do this again, Jill.
Absolutely. Thank you, Evan. That was amazing. That was a lot of information. I'm extremely impressed that you have all of that in your head. So thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. And